Hello everybody, I hope you're doing well today. I am bringing you an Ordnance focused Amon build that revolves around infinite ammo. This build is very strong when it comes to bossing, but excels at mobbing more than any other build I've seen in the game so far. Now, mobbing is not a focus of the BL4 endgame loop right now outside of drill sites, but this build clears drill sites extremely quick, which makes farming them for their dedicated drops a breeze. This build will also hold up well in the future if and when mobbing endgame content is added. Don't take all this mobbing praise as an indication of the build being lackluster when bossing though, as that is clearly not the case. It just won't be one-tapping bosses through any sort of bug damage interaction or by abusing the crit knife, obviously. Expect bosses like vault monsters to be around 5 to 10 seconds in kill time. There is a variety of different gear we can use when bossing, so we'll be talking about both aspects of the build during this video. I would recommend farming out the gear needed for mobbing first, however, as it is very easy to get and will help you with farming out the rest of the loot for bossing since a portion of the build is sourced from world drops. I do also have a written guide up on Mobalytics that goes into detail about the build and will explain the build similarly to how we are in this video if you want to reference something while you farm out the gear. Luckily, as I said before, this build is pretty easy to farm out, but the written guide is great for seeing synergies via hyperlinked abilities that are convenient to view in the guide without any kinds of redirects. This guide will cover everything, by the way, and even allows me to make variations of the build in the same guide, allowing me to show you differences between bossing and mobbing within the build. So if you are interested in the written guide, I will have a link in the description below. Alright, let's talk skills. First, we have Blue Tree, 5 points in Scorch Kairos, Ordnance damage no-brainer, but the magazine size is just as important if you're running a 6-round Torque rocket because it allows you to overfill the magazine, which will keep you from putting it away if you fire a triple barrel burst. Then, you have Battleborn for the 40% increased damage when at full HP, which you will be all the time with this build. Then, Tail of the Comet, which is the strongest skill in the build as of right now because you have a 30% chance on hit with Ordnance to apply a 60% damage over time effect to the target. Now this works with any kind of ordnance, but will be especially pronounced with rockets because that 60% will be sourced from the rocket itself. And if you fire a full burst, you have a 30% chance per rocket in that burst to apply this. Very, very strong. And if you end up proccing this on more than half the burst, you will probably not need to fire a second one as the boss will just melt. Then we have 5 points in Blackout in our right side capstone tree because ordnance damage will have 15% chance to critical hit with this skill. And that 105% damage dealt per second is insane, and would be the strongest skill in the game if it were not bugged. Sorry, strongest skill in the build if it were not bugged, because currently it is only doing 21% damage dealt per second as its level 1 value, and does not benefit from further level ups. Now, when this does get fixed, it is going to be absolutely obnoxious, because 105% of damage dealt per second is obviously insane. Then, our class mod is giving us 3 points in Primal Surge. Now you only need 1 point here, but we did roll 3, and this allows us to maintain infinite ammo on our ordnance and keep our shields maxed out whenever we apply a status. Now that does count for Tail of the Comet and for Blackout. Then we have another point in Ballistic Bulwark from the class mod, and I think this is the single most important class mod skill to roll on your Cyborg class mod, which we'll talk about later, because it gives you overshield whenever you deal ordnance damage. And when you're in endgame Borderlands, this is going to be maxed out all the time because it's a percentage of the damage dealt. Very strong for survivability and for damage of life, but we'll talk more about that on gear. Then we go into Green Tree and we take 5 points in Executioner right off the bat. That 20% increased crit damage is very strong. Now you can melee the boss to bring that to 40%, but for our current Forge skill and everything we have going on, it's just not really practical in the prep time because we only get an 8-second duration from it to prep that. You can do it if you want for the extra 20%. It is a decent amount. I'm not doing it though. It's too much of an inconvenience for me. Then we have 5 points in Gathering Storm. Great for mobbing, 45% increased elemental damage. Great for mobbing, and if there's mobs in the boss arena, you can also benefit from this as well. Though if you want to have more of a neutral game skill, you could instead invest those points into Bolt Action and get 30% bonus damage on your regular weapons, your non-ordnance weapons, which is very strong since bonus damage is multiplicative. So very strong if you want a neutral game option. I don't take it because ordnance is up all the time, but if you do have a mishap where you end up putting it away, this could be great to sustain you until it's back up. Then we put 5 points in Herald's Call for the 30% increased shock damage. That will help with bolt action synergy if you're going that route, but it will also feed into Blackout and Blue Tree, which is very strong. Then we have 5 points in Cacophony, which just increases ordnance damage. We're not really benefiting from detonation radius as we aren't priming targets with this build. Then this next one is really important, Endless Bombardment. You want 4 or 5 points into this depending on what you want to do because it helps maintain infinite ammo on your ordnance, but the last one could be changed out depending on what you're using to boss. Now, Stoked is great for mobbing, of course, but if you think you're good in the mobbing department and you want to focus more on bossing, you can definitely benefit from Stoked on a Vladoff machine gun if you want to use that for bossing, or if you want to take the mobbing weapon into bossing as well. This will help, but if you are using a 6-round Torgue rocket, you do not need 5 points here, and you could instead reinvest those into Bellows for 35% increased gun damage. Now, the caveat is that you do need to use your Forge skill, which I think is inconvenient, and I don't like adding that into my prep time. So I personally would put those 5 points into Ancient Ways for the 30% cryo damage, which will feed into Tail of the Comet. But again, up to you. Talking about specs, we have Riddle You This, which is a staple in almost every gun damage build because it's 50% increased gun damage. Very strong. Now, you aren't going to fully benefit from this if you're using a rocket, but you will partially benefit from it, and you will be able to use this to its full extent when using either the Vladoff MGs or the mobbing weapon for bossing. Either way, this will be maxed out most likely whenever you are mobbing. We also use Full Spectrum Arsenal, just so that our ordnance benefits from gun damage increases, even though we're already benefiting from that because it is a heavy weapon. So this just feeds into itself and is strong. Then we have Fragmentation Payload, which gives us an extra 5%, bringing it up to a total of 20% crit chance when paired with Blackout. And it also increases our Ordnance critical hit damage. Now, the comfort skill we're using is Best Defense. We are always going to have a full shield with this build. We'll talk about that more with gear, but it also helps because we are using Ballistic Bulwark. This is just an extra 30% damage tacked on top. Now, if you want to maximize your damage, you will take Bullet Train. You'll put points into Runner and take Bullet Train. I would either remove Riddle You This if you're using rockets, or Best Defense if you aren't using rockets, because Bullet Train scales way higher than what it says in the card, because keep in mind that is 15% when walking speed with 0 movement speed buffs. And Onslaughter does give us movement speed buffs, and you also don't need to be walking. You can be jumping around, you can be sliding and hovering. You can get this well above 30% just by moving around. So Bullet Train is really strong if you want to maximize, but I don't really use it because I like to turn my brain off and just stand still and fire one burst. That's just a me thing though. If you want to maximize, Bullet Train's the way to go about it. So let's talk gear. Ordnance first. Primary weapon, you can use whatever you want. It's not a primary weapon focus build, but Ordnance. Disc Jockey is your strongest mobbing tool in the entire game. Shooting the ground will allow this thing to track other targets. Any ricochet will always track other enemies. So it's incredible. Each ricochet counts as direct damage. They can all proc Tail of the Comet, they can all proc Blackout, and they all feed into Deadeye, which we'll talk about later. Very strong mobbing weapon. You just shoot in the direction of enemies and the ricochets will kill. Now, as far as bossing goes, you want to go and find a rocket, 6-round rocket, if you want to use a rocket, that is, which I do recommend, that has both shrapnel and triple barrel on it. This is the best combination of passives you can get on a rocket because shrapnel increases the damage per projectile anytime a rocket hits. It'll be massively increased damage due to shrapnel. And triple barrel allows you to get the fire rate really high because it turns it into a 6-round burst. So those are the two you want to find. You can element match. I do, but that's a little bit of a hassle. So just take what you can get. You can get them in different elements as well. Now you can also use Vladoff MGs. So thing you need to be looking for though is 2-shot because 2-shot is just incredible. Look at the damage, 2073 times 2. You want to look for the 2-shot passive. And on top of that, you want to find explosive rounds as well, since that is also just a direct damage increase. As far as rep kits go, I use Shiny Warpaint. You're never going to be using rep kits for mobbing as it makes you put your ordnance away, which is no bueno. So whenever you're using Shiny Warpaint, you're just going to use it for prep before a boss kill. Now, I have Leech on mine, but if you find fire rate for your own, that's even better. And not to mention, it also increases movement speed. So if you want to use the Bullet Train Specialization like we just talked about, this will help you out in that regard as well. Now, for enhancements, manufacturer enhancement bonuses don't get applied to Ordnance, so you're only going to be looking for passives on this. Gun damage is a must-have since it's its own separate multiplicative value when on enhancements only, so you definitely want to find gun damage. And then anything else that has gun in the title will be beneficial to you. Luckily for me, I found one that has gun critical damage as well, but finding things with like gun splash damage or gun fire rate can also help out the build quite a bit. Now, there's two options you have for shields. Protein Cell for mobbing is really strong because it gives you 40% bonus shock damage, which again is multiplicative because it's bonus. This will make it so that you take damage and usually get one shot because any damage you take will bypass a shield and hit your health bar. So if you're having a hard time staying alive in boss fights, or you think you're going to get hit in like the opening attack, like the wake up attack of a boss, you could swap this out for a what's for dinner. But before we show you what's for dinner, I also want to say that the shield drain from Protean Cell after slamming is completely nullified by activating Onslaughter, because Onslaughter, our action skill, generates shield faster than this drains it. So you're never going to have a natural drain during a boss fight as long as the fight ends in less than 18 seconds, which they all should. Now you could also run What's for Dinner. What's for Dinner is the strongest neutral game shield in the game, but it also gives us a 25% bonus shock damage. Don't read the card and think it's just an increase. It is a bonus. It has been tested. It is bonus damage. So it makes it one of the best bossing shields in the game as well, because we're always going to have overshield online due to Ballistic Bulwark coming from our class mod. So very strong shield for both survivability and damage. Now, speaking of class mods, you need to find a cyborg. This is essential because of the skills it rolls. Primal Surge, Endless Bombardment, Scorched Kairos, Ballistic Bulwark. Those skills are all S tier and very important. Now, I did not roll good passive. Now, status effect application chance, I do believe, ties into Tail of the Comet. So that is actually a heavily desired passive to have on this, but I don't have any direct damage bonuses because I'm not using kinetic damage in my builds. If I had a kinetic 6-round rocket, this would obviously help me, but just know that the damage you've seen in my clips can be a lot better if you find a better cyborg than I have. I don't consider the cyborg to be too great. Desired passives are obviously any kind of damage you'll benefit from. So things like splash damage, specific elemental damage. Kinetic damage is great if you have a kinetic rocket, but splash damage, ordnance crit chance could also be really good. And status effect application chance is obviously very good because of Tail of the Comet. So these are all quite strong, and unfortunately I don't really have too many of them other than status effect application chance. So you do have a high chance of finding a better version of a cyborg than me. Now, as far as our firmware goes, we take a 3-piece and a Deadeye. This is really strong because at max stacks you get a 100% bonus crit chance, and we are hedging our bets on landing those crits because we like Blackout, especially once it gets fixed. Now, with a 6-round rocket, you're not going to benefit from full stacks, but even with a few stacks, that crit damage is going to really buff up the damage of your rocket, so it'll make up for the lack of total stacks. You're obviously going to have this maxed out when using Disc Jockey or a Vladoff MG. High Caliber is chosen because that gun damage increase is actually its own separate multiplicative value because it's on shot, not on hit. So this does outweigh the 20% bonus from Gadgets Ahoy, which is why we are running this. Now, if you're running a lower damage weapon, like a Vladoff MG or the Disc Jockey, perhaps, then you could run Gadgets Ahoy for the 20% additive, but I don't care to, especially because I'm using the rocket for bossing primarily, and the higher the base damage, the higher the benefit from multiplicative values, so we do run 2-piece High Caliber. So how do you play this build? Well, for bossing, you start by slamming the ground for Protean Cell before the fight starts, then use your action skill Onslaughter for the 25% bonus incendiary damage, shield gen, and move speed. Then use Warpaint for the increased fire rate and move speed, and just unload into the boss. The timing for when you want to do your prep rotation depends on the boss and how long its wake up is, but you want to try to time it so that you'll have your ordnance out and ready to shoot as soon as the boss is able to take damage. For mobbing, however, you don't need to think or prep at all, you just shoot. Not even necessarily at enemies, just in their general direction. Oftentimes, it's faster to shoot at the ground actually, because Disc Jockey just takes care of the aiming part for you. It's easily the fastest mobbing I've seen in the entire game so far, and I really hope they have endgame mobbing similar to Slaughter Shaft or Mallow on Takedown in the future for this build to really shine, since its mobbing capabilities are genuinely insane. Also, the game's been out for a month, so I think it's okay to show this, but spoilers anyway for those who don't want to see a Timekeeper fight. Now this kill can be significantly quicker when using rockets, but on some of the larger, more complexly shaped bosses like Timekeeper Phase 2, the disc jockey can actually cook them, because sometimes it will ricochet into the boss again instead of the floor. So it is an S tier mobbing weapon, but it does have some fun use cases like right here, so don't count it out entirely for bossing. Disc jockey can boss effectively. That does it for the build though. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like and comment as that helps out a bunch. We also just recently had a big weapon balance patch that buffed a few weapons, including the Hellwalker, so I might make a Hellwalker build for Amon in the near future, but no promises. My written guide is in the description below if you want to recap this build, and if you ever want to hang out live, my Twitch is down there as well. I hope you all have a great day. I'm Haderaxe, signing out. Peace.